Got it.
All right,
Okay.
gotta find this. Jen, thanks for being here. It's good to see you here because we missed a week, we missed a session, and that was on us. I think we collectively just got overwhelmed, as I think many of you guys were feeling overwhelmed with all the stuff going on. So, thank you for being here for Master Your Craft session number 12. Uh, Buyer consultation. We're going to talk about the follow-up from last week, and I'll again put it on the record for last session. I think using some of the things we talked about and sort of the documents and pieces and dialogues to really get that in the hands of anyone who's, as I always say, thinking about getting ready to consider buying, right? It really walks them through the process of how to start thinking about getting ready to buy. And it really preemptively answers a lot of those questions that they're going to have. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what I'll say the buyer consultation, actually sitting down at the table in a room and having this conversation. And Jen, I said this to you a little bit earlier the other day, and we'll talk about this at the end of the session. I, I just think this is one of those highly necessary things. And just like any rule, the 80/20 rule, when you do it, things tend to go better. Do they go perfectly? They never do. When we don't do this, and I think collectively, the agents in the room will say, when things start to drift and then they really drift, and it's like, well, I showed them 74 homes and this, and I just don't know what to do. Well, we can't solve the problem afterwards, but we can do some things in the beginning to help mitigate that. And that's really what this conversation is about. Knowing that buyers are going to drift, they're going to sit on the fence. You heard me say the phrase buyers are liars, which I do not think is true at all. What we're trying to do in this piece is really set expectations. And I think for me, I use that word all the time. Expectations, right? We can ignore them, as I often do sometimes, right? But at least I know what the expectations are and we know what those look like. So I want to start with this, right? This idea. Buying and selling a home usually begins financially, and it almost always ends emotionally, right? When we talk about the selling side, they're like, I want the most money. And then they realize like they're leaving the home and there's all these things, right? On the buying side, it's really even, I think, a stronger shift. It's like, I need to buy a home, and all I'm thinking about is this financial component. Can I afford it? And as we go through this process and they're signing documents and they're paying for things and they're doing all of this, now it really becomes this emotional attachment of like, wow, we're buying a house and we're going to have neighbors and we're making this commitment. And I think for us it's important to keep that in mind in that process. Jen, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, you see this from an outsider perspective. Anything you
No, I totally agree with you, though. I think it's emotional, like you said, on both sides of the deal, but it is definitely emotional for buyers, especially when trying to nail down, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, nail
Yeah,
down what it is that they really want and
yeah,
kind of overcoming the uncertainty of, am I doing the right thing? Is
yep.
this the perfect home for me? It's a stressful decision to make. So,
Yeah, and this is really our opportunity to introduce, I'll say, a little bit of a calming factor and just to help that.
mhm.
And how we do this, and the buyer consultation, wherever you do it, I do not think it should be a Starbucks. Like when, probably 10 years ago, people were like, oh, I love to be at Starbucks. You're like, you're taking an emotional situation and adding all of this chaos. Like there is no coffee shop in the world where I feel like you could be fully present and calm and like you take in all this energy. I'm like, just do it in an office and control the environment, right? It's an environment to define the expectations, the process, potential issues, all without an emotional attachment to a property. When emotion gets involved, right, we start thinking with this as opposed to this, and that's when things go sideways. And really, this buyer consultation is to talk about what could happen without having a specific property address associated to that, because we all know, Jen, when it comes to I don't want to lose this property. Well, we're probably going to lose this property because we're so far behind the process that that's going to happen. But let's talk about how we don't lose the next property and what that looks like. And I know I'm resharing this graph. Uh, the numbers continue to trend of the massive comparison in more sellers than buyers right now. Now, this means a couple things, right? And if we're having a selling conversation, it's a very different conversation that we're talking about in terms of price and position and all of those things. But here, the danger for us is um, a buyer who doesn't really know what they want and will know it when they see it. There are so many homes out there that could potentially be the one for them. And I don't think that's a dangerous thing necessarily, because sometimes we're going to have buyers who are like, hey, you call me when you find something, and I'm going to spend minimal time with you, Jen, taking you out every single weekend, knowing that you're just going to do your thing. I'm totally cool with that if those are the clients you want. But knowing the number of homes out there, I think it's important to remind them that, buying a home is a process of elimination. This dialogue sort of gives the sense. Based on your time frame, we eliminate the homes that don't match your needs, wants, price, location, et cetera, and we make offers on the ones that do. And I think framing that up front for clients helps shift the mindset to these homes are relatively limited resources. There's only one particular home like the one home. There's many similar homes, but it's not like you go to a car lot and you're like, I want a black Mercedes. Well, we don't have one. Well, we'll wait till we get one. Okay. That's not how this process works. And the typical buyer is thinking, well, I'll just wait till the next one comes on. And if they have time frames and schools and things like that and financial situations, we then constrain that. So I think it's important to remind our clients, we're eliminating the non-options and we're going with, good, bad, or indifferent. The one we're left with could be your home, right? Any thoughts on that, Jen? I know we talked about that the other day.
Yeah, we did. And there is, we're going to talk about it a little bit on Tuesday also about finding the 85% perfect home. Like it's
Yeah.
going to be really, unless you have the money to custom build your dream home, there are
Right.
going to be certain things that are must haves, and there are going to be certain things that are deal breakers.
Yeah.
So, really being able to have that conversation prior to going out, and we're going to talk about this here in a minute, and then start to hone that in to eliminate
Yeah.
or
Well,
keep, your top three. You don't want your buyers to have a top 10, that's a lot, but to
yeah.
kind of
Yep.
shift that list of what features are most important to them and
Yep.
help them hone in on that.
Yeah, I just realized it's a lot like dating. You're like, what are your must-haves? What are the I can live with kind of things, right? You're like, well, you know what? I can live with that now. So that's gonna be like,
Yeah,
sorry, I jumped ahead of
I
slide.
can live with
Uh,
that. You're
I
awesome,
can live
Jake.
with that. This is good enough, right? Um, this I think is a massively important data piece to share with any buyer anywhere in the process because we forget because we do it all the time. This is just normal. This is just what I do. A buyer who hasn't purchased in a while, or even if they have, maybe it didn't go like this before. According to the National Association of Realtors, and this data has been relatively consistent, the numbers popped up a little bit in 2021, but otherwise consistent. A typical buyer actively looking for 10 weeks, and they typically consider 8 to 10 homes. And I think framing that to someone who's starting the process lets them know what normal feels like, right? Because on one side, you've got the buyers who are like, oh, it's normal to look at 65 homes. That's what I did last time. And you're like, well, that's an anomaly, right? And then the buyers that are like, well, I don't want to waste your time. We're only going to go look at 3 homes. You're like, normal, common, right? 8 to 10 homes. And I think it's really important for us to share that with our clients so they know what normal feels like. We all want to know what normal feels like. So let's talk about the green print a little bit here for the buyers. Here's the stuff for the most part that I want you to have ready and with you. And you know me, this isn't just I gather it up for the buyer consultation in the office meeting. I feel like we should have this stuff with us pretty much all of the time because, we'll make the rule that we do it in the office. But if you're out and you meet somebody and they want to talk about this stuff, you showing your preparedness to do this is also how you communicate your value, right? We got the buyer book. That buyer book is fantastic. It is one of the best put together buyer books that I think I've seen from any brand. There's a whole great section on terminology and definitions and process and all the little things that we talk about every single day. But I always say, I remember the first time we bought a house, and I asked the question, which I know we've all heard. I'm like, so inspection and appraisal, I mean, are they like, and now on the other side, I laugh about it all the time because I'm like, wow, I was ignorant about the process. And I was involved in the industry, and I still didn't fully understand what that really meant. So you can guarantee that your typical buyer is not going to know. We also have the first time buyer book combo sort of piece. Keep a couple of copies with that with you. And we'll talk about and we'll show you these pages. The buyer survey and the buyer intake form, which we have, which used to be just for the sellers. We had a seller questionnaire and the mic drop pages, and now we've added the buyer questionnaire so it all fits together. Again, keeping the mic drop pages separate if you want. Of course, several versions of your contracts forms and things like that. And I love to have a generic estimated closing cost breakdown. And a lot of times you can just get these pre-filled. It's like if you're buying a $300,000 house or a 500 or so, it doesn't have to be dialed in for any particular home. But I think, like anything, when you go and purchase something, you're like, I'm getting my car fixed. I'm like, is this going to be $100 or 1,000? Right? I just need to know where that's going to fall. And I think for our clients, knowing what that could be is important. And Jen, I saw a couple questions in the chat. Anything that
Yes. Carmen had, and you started to hit right on it. She asked, do you have a general list of costs buyers can expect before they close? Things
Yep.
like inspections and so on. And we can put that together and we'll put it in the
Yeah,
mastercraft folder.
and correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like that is a page in the current buyer book, and I can't. I've looked at so many different pieces lately that I don't know. But Carmen, we can get you that, and I think
Mhm.
that's it's a great piece sometimes from lenders to put together and stuff like that. So on that note, Carmen, here's just a little tip or trick. I sometimes love to have financial information like that on the letterhead of the lender or someone like that, just for the pure idea that it's not something you provided, it's something that somebody else. It's almost like, adding in more documentation from outside sources. And I feel like that's kind of a nice little mental thing when they're like, oh, this was put together by a third party. It just gives it that extra little validity in a sense. It just that little random thing. So we got those pieces, we got them together. Um, there's going to be a lot of other things that I know you guys use, and I'd love for you to send Jen and I messages, and we'll talk about this in the meetings on Tuesday. Any other stuff that you have? I mean, I know several of the offices have toys in the office for the kids to keep them busy, and coloring books and stuff, and maybe you keep a spare bottle of wine like somewhere. Like, what are those things to make the process go a little bit smoother? So let's talk about the meeting. Um, we're going to get in the room, we're going to sit down, and here's, I like to start this way. And I think we typically would go into selling mode in a lot of these situations. Like, okay, I'm going to open the book and I'm going to sell and I'm going to talk about what I do in this and this. And that's not a bad idea. However, I do think that there are other ideas that are also viable. So, again, this is a your mileage, your sort of choice. Here's what I like to do. We're taking the mic drop pages. We're using the exact same mic drop pages we'd use on the selling side. We're just converting the dialogue to be more buyer specific. So I'll sort of talk about this idea. So I'd be like, hey, Jen, before we get started, I want to share with you, I shared before the typical buyer actively looking for about 10 weeks. They look at 8 to 10 homes that they're actively considering. And I want to share a little bit more with you. Here's how they do that. Here's how they find these homes, right? So I'm going to turn the buyer sheet around and talk about this, right? This is National Association of Realtors data. I think if I look, it's 2025, 2024 probably, but still pretty accurate. They're going to look at professional photos. They're going to look at detailed information about properties. They're going to look at floor plans. They're going to look at all these things. What you're doing is setting the expectation in a good way that it's like, as the agent, I'm going to help find a lot of these things, but there is going to be an amount of work and process and evaluation that I'm going to expect you to do, right? Not just you send me a property and I thumbs up, thumbs down it, right? The client needs to be involved in this process, and I think, that's one of the things that clients don't typically realize is how much work is involved. They're like, this is overwhelming. Like it is an overwhelming process. And really, we're just talking about these are the things that buyers find important in the home search. And then I would ask the question, hey, Jen, is there anything else that you feel might help you make an informed decision on the buying process? Is there anything on this list that you don't even care about? Right? You're like, do you not even care about virtual open houses and those things? And it helps us get into their mindset of how they process. And again, sets the tone for how we expect them to be involved in the process. This is not me do the work and take you along. Not to say we wouldn't do that, because we will, but also the expectation is going to be a different. Any thoughts there, Jen, real quick?
Yeah, I think this is important to go through with the buyers that, you know, these are the things that we can do for you. And what things are most important for me. My next home will hopefully be my forever home, and I don't have
Mhm.
kids. So the neighborhood information piece for me doesn't
Yeah.
include schools. That's not
Yep.
what I'm concerned with. But shoot, I do want a community that has a pool. So
Yeah.
that's important to
Yep.
me. So
Yeah.
those kind of things and being able to go through these things with your client and talk about might help them also realize what things it is that they're looking for as well.
Yep. And that's exactly what this is designed to do. It's to sort of get them up to speed and start thinking through the process. And again, and we'll talk about it in a second, if they've had those intake forms, they're thinking a little bit. But this just sets the standard for this is what every buyer, when we look at the National Association of Realtors, this is what they expect. You
Mhm.
probably fit into this category, but I'm not going to pigeonhole you. Are there other things? So we also use the seller sheet where we sort of talk about, other brokerages don't necessarily do all these things. We do all of these things, but I like to position this with our buyers to say this, and I put it as the first line. Zillow falls short. Jen, as we look at homes, here's the thing. There's a common perception that you're going to log into Zillow, you're going to look at properties, and Zillow is going to send you properties, and that's the properties that are available. We'll talk about this in a second, Jen, but I know that one of the common four fears is that people are going to miss something. Well, and I'm going to hit on this point a little bit extra, Jen, because I don't want you to miss anything, right? We're going to spend 8 to 10 weeks looking at homes. You're going to look at 10 homes. I don't want you to find a home that all of a sudden you're like, where was this home? Here's how we avoid doing this. Right now, Better Homes and Gardens is a listing agent. When I represent a seller, I'm going to do all of these things. Sometimes the seller's like, hey, we don't need to do this. But for the most part, I do every single one of these things. Now, the other side of the coin, not all listing agents or the agent representing the seller does any number of these things. So I'm using this as a caution for us to say that just because you've got a Zillow account and you go to Zillow doesn't mean that every property is going to be there, right? 14% of homes aren't even listed on the multiple listing service, which is where Zillow gets its information from to find properties, right? And so as this list goes down, agents from other companies tend to not use all of the tools to promote a property. Now, that's not us. Here's what we're going to do. Like, I'm going to make sure that we don't miss anything because we're going to take advantage of opportunities to find properties in the ways that maybe other agents don't market. And I get to do that because of my connections in this office and my connections with the other offices we have with Better Homes and Gardens around the city, and also my relationships with other agents from different brokerages because here's this new thing that we're going to talk about, and that's when I'm going to get into the open versus private listing conversation. And I don't want to unpack this too deeply because I know we all have a lot of feelings about it, but the short answer is they're going to exist. And how we find those homes because they're not on the MLS and all of those things as agents is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I think the important part of the conversation is we introduce this idea that there will start to be homes that are on the market that you're not necessarily going to know about because there's not a sign, there's not a Zillow listing, it's not even on our MLS, and those properties are going to exist. And there's a page in the book that talks about page 9 that talks about what that means. It's in the buyer book, but it talks about what it means why the seller would do that to help them understand sort of the trade-off from the buyer perspective. So really this page is again just deepening that commitment to say, I don't want you to miss anything, so we're going to make sure that all of these little areas we're looking for, right, to make sure you don't miss any homes on that list. Um, so we're going to switch over. Oh, did you have something, Jen? Did I miss?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
You're good.
So this initial buyer survey, which is now new to the mic drop pages. We got 4 mic drop pages, right? The initial seller survey, which you had before. We've added the buyer survey and then those 2 mic drop pages that I showed before. These all work together in concert and tandem, and I want to give you a sense of how we'd go through that, right? So to me, I would want this filled out beforehand. This is one of those pages that I would, give to a buyer who's like, I'm thinking about buying. I'm like, do me a favor. Take a look at this. And this is really going to help you start to process what it's like to begin the process. And I'll give you a call. We can talk about it later. Hey, before you come in tomorrow, Jen, if you could just take a look at that form. You don't have to fill it out, but we'll talk about it in the office, right? So at this point, I might pause and say, hey, take a couple of minutes. You and your partner, do you mind filling these out separately? I kind of sometimes love that idea of the separate piece. Yes, of course they're on the same page, right? We never meet partners, couples, 2 home buyers that aren't on the same page. The way people write information, the way they convey information helps us tell a lot too. So I don't mind doing 2 versions. So that first one, we're basically like ranking the concern on a scale of 1 to 10. How afraid are you of missing out on something? How afraid are you of losing something? So we're going to write it 1 to 10. The next 4, they're going to rank those 1 through 4. What's the most important? Budget, features, location, or condition, right? And that really, I always think of it as the car sales grid where you sit down and buy a car, and no matter what number you put here, they move some numbers here, and somehow the numbers feel better, but it doesn't change anything. It's kind of like that for us, but it helps us really determine, does this house that they picture in their mind actually exist in that sort of manner? So what I really love to do, and I'll share some of these dialogues in a longer form. When we know that the 4 biggest fears of buyers are miss something, lose something, pay too much, or get a property with a problem, it's important to address those things, right? And Jen, if you mark, that you're number 9 afraid of you're going to pay too much, right? You rank that as number 9. So I want us to have a dialogue to really address each of those 4 areas. And I've got some sample dialogues for that, but hey, Jen, here's the thing. Now, I'm going to make this as a joke, Jen, but the short answer is I feel like we always think we pay too much, and sometimes I think we just do pay too much, right? Sometimes I don't know that a house should actually cost that much. So I say that sarcastically, Jen, because I feel like we always pay too much. But here's what I'd tell you. I'm going to make sure that you don't pay more than what the market tells us the value of this home would be, right? The market sometimes determines that. Now, if you love a home and we're willing to pay more than, we can talk about that. But one of the things that I'll do, Jen, is once you've narrowed down the 2 or 3 homes that you really, really love that meet the criteria, I'm going to take a look at the market. I'm going to run, initial market position, a market analysis. I'm going to look at this home as if I were the listing agent pricing this home to sell. And I'm going to share a bunch of data with you of what homes in the neighborhood have sold for to help give you a little more clarity and comfort on whether or not you feel comfortable with that price. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to pay more than you feel like you should, but I'm going to make sure that that number is verified and validated with what the market tells us that other people are currently paying.
Mhm.
So you might pay more, Jen, but everybody else is paying basically the same amount. Is that okay? Right? And that's kind of a long-winded way to go through that process. But when we anchor it back to it's a lot of money, the short answer is it's always going to be a lot of money, but I'm going to make sure that that value matches, right? If they talk about problem properties, agenda in this process, and there's an inspection piece and all of this. When we make offers on homes, we're going to get an inspection, and that's going to go in and here's the good and the bad side of this, Jen. It's going to tell us everything that's wrong with that property. And in my experience, here's what typically happens. You love this home, and then we get this inspection, and it can be one of the saddest parts of the process for you because it's just a list of all the things that are wrong with this potential boyfriend you want to date. It's all of their red flags, right? And you're going to look at that and be like, every door sticks and everything is this and everything is. But what we're really looking for is, are there any, catastrophic issues? Are there any major concerns in this home? The other stuff, just a lot of little random things that we might have to deal with. And I want you to know that there is no perfect in shape home. Even new builds have a lot of issues to those. But I want to make sure that we know everything to expect from that home. And at that time, we've got some negotiating power that we can do to either remedy those things financially or in other manners that anything that's wrong with the home we at least know about and have an opportunity to negotiate. Does that make you feel a little bit better? Right. It's really about allaying those fears early on. And again, there's some dialogues to go through each one of those that I'll share a little bit with you. All of those things relate back to the buyer book. If you need to revisit pages in the buyer book, there's pieces that talk about the inspection, the appraisal, all of those things that we can anchor back. I try not to go through the book through the whole thing, but really just flip to a page and mark it with something and write a quick little note. Hey, review this for me if you have some more questions. Feel, felt, found, classic psychology piece. Hey, Jen, a lot of people feel the same way. They felt that they were afraid of buying a home that they were going to have to do a whole lot of work on. We've found typically that with the inspection, you at least know what to expect going in, and in a few months, there's not going to be anything catastrophically wrong. Right. So we validate their feelings because those are valid feelings. These are the four things most people are afraid of. I know I'm going to go on a little long, Jen. Anything that you want to add in that process?
No, you hit the nail on the head.
So that next section, and here's where we really bring it home, right? Budget, features, and location and condition, right? We take a look at that. We sort of see how that fits. What I love to do at that time is then take everything we know and run a sample website search to say, okay, so these things are important. Here's what you told me you were looking for in a home. Let's just see what the market tells us is currently available, right? You want to pay 350,000, but you want to live in Brookside, but you need the home to be flawless and also, right? So we don't ever say that home doesn't exist. We just say there are not many of those opportunities on the market right now, right? So I think that validation, even if it's not so crazy, but they're like, hey, this is what I'm really looking for. And you find that there's only two homes that match that, right? Then you get to say that those homes do exist. There's typically not very many at any given time, which of course means there will be some competition for those, which does potentially mean that we might end up paying more than what the market even tells us those homes are worth because we need to beat out other buyers. Are we comfortable with that? Right. So you're using that framework to say, is what we see right now something that you're comfortable with? And, if you look at those homes and they're in serious need of repair. Hey, the home does exist, but they're in this condition. Are we okay with that? And it helps adjust those expectations a little bit. And here's the thing. Maybe they're like, yeah, we're good with this. And in your heart of hearts, you're like, they are not good with this. But we've had the conversation. and you can anchor back to that and be like, hey, Jen, remember when we met? You gave me the impression that you were okay with that. I understand things have changed. Let's talk about it. So, really, that anchoring idea of before we really get started, is this generic framework the expectation that you want? So, the last part of this form, and I'll wrap up a little bit long. I apologize if you have to jump. I understand. I sort of go into this lending expectation piece. And you can see this, excuse me, you can see that line that I have there where we talk about payment versus price. Your clients will be infinitely fixated on the price, the sticker price, the MLS data that says this home is $490. They're going to be so focused on that number, and this is just human nature. They forget to attach that to a monthly check, right? I know we don't write checks anymore, but the amount of money that comes out of your checking account every month, including all of the other stuff that is added on to the ticket when you check out, right? You're like, a service charge? I don't know what this is. Convenience fee? This stinks. Ask them to have a genuine introspective moment to say, what amount of money are you comfortable putting on a check every single month for this home? And that's really where you can help them. Like, typically a $300,000 home is going to look like this. If there's no HOA, it's going to be three, whatever this number is, right? And if their expression is like, that's what I write the check for, you're like, yes. And they're like, and then you say, how do you feel about that? Attaching it to that monthly budget number, I think, is crucial for this conversation. It takes an unknown, I sometimes can't even picture what $500,000 looks like, but I can certainly think about $2,000 every month, right? That's something I can attach to very specifically. That's where I also bring out the sample closing cost. Here's what you're also going to have to pay on top of that before we even get to the ability to make your monthly payments, right? Some things, and the lending conversation, some things can be looped in. I added this extra line because I think this is a very important piece that stymies the conversation a lot. Do you have any minor or major expenses, purchases, trips in the next 12 months? Please list those things. You're like, yeah, we're thinking about doing this. I'm like, no, you are not. I like to include the word minor because nobody thinks buying a car is a minor thing. I mean, I do, but most people are like, oh, we just bought a car. We just bought furniture. We just bought this. Hey, during this process, we're just not going to buy anything. And I even go to the little steps. Sometimes I like to have them acknowledge that. It's not a legally binding thing, but just simply, okay, right? And then you're like, Jen, we had a discussion about this and we discussed that you were, well, it's just this. I know it's just that, but now we're in danger of losing that home because of this, right? And that's how we anchor that back. And I'm not a jerk about it, but at the same time, I like to point out that we're entering into a freeze period where we're not going to make a whole lot of other decisions because this is our big decision as we go through. And of course, the last piece, the lender information. Hey, how serious are you in this process? So the next step's really at that point. We've covered their needs, their fears, the expectation of how we go through the process. We've covered how you work to support them by finding properties that aren't just simply going to be listed on the MLS, right? That's sort of our value add piece. Hey, it's not just you get the thing, you tell me to go look at the property, right? I'm going to be doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and we know, and in fairness, sometimes there's not a lot of work, and sometimes there is a lot of work to find these extra properties. And when they can't find something they like, that's when we sort of go the extra mile and help cultivate some listings for them, right? We do some farming and some things like that. Of course, getting the agreement signed is really our big takeaway here. That buyer representation agreement. Sometimes they're fine with the conversation. They'll sign it right away in the beginning. Sometimes they need a little bit more. Hey, what are you going to do for this process to go through that? That in itself is really an entire subsection if they have difficulty with this. But I feel like what we've done is we've made it about them. We've talked them through the process. We've given them kind of I won't say an overwhelming amount of expectations of the process. And we've then added in how we support those initiatives without directly selling us and being like, I do all this stuff for you. So, once we're to this point, that the objections should be mitigated a little bit. At that point, I go ahead and finalize the automated search. Hey, and I'm going to leave this in. I'm going to set up the search. I know you didn't want to pay for I don't care what you, but just so you don't miss out, it's your permission on top value, just so you know what those properties look like. I don't want you to buy anything you don't want to buy. I don't want you to spend any more money. That's not it.
Jake, you are cutting out big time and frozen now. Will you check your internet connection? Oh, guys, we lost Jake. Give me just a second and I will share my screen and finish this up. We're almost done anyway. Oh, he's coming back on. Oh, there he is. I will not share my screen.
I have no idea what happened. I apologize.
Yeah, you went out. You were very choppy. And then I think you might have lost your internet connection.
Yeah, it looks like it did.
Okay. So
Changes are
we're at
working
the
for
point
me.
where we're just
Yeah,
wrapping up
yeah. So
anyway.
I'll just share
So,
this real quick, right? Like, so the idea goes back to that point of, um, I tell them I'm going to set the parameters a little bit wider, just simply because I want you to see what's just outside of your range, only because I think that helps give comfort to making the choice that we make, right? And so I'll set that search up. I always do that for Moxie. The branding is consistent with you. It matches your website. I think that's just a thing we should do. And I know most of you use the MLS, which I don't oppose. I just think it looks better with our matching brand and consistent branding for you. I do like to pull a couple of pages from Moxie of the buyer tour and show them, hey, when we go look at properties, here's what I'm going to give for all the properties we're going to look at. And it's a much nicer version, honestly, than the MLS printouts that you guys use. Again, I don't mind it, but there's an overwhelming amount of information on those MLS sheets. This pares it down to the stuff that matters to the client for the most part. And it has a little note section and it's just a nicer package to use. And then at that point, I encourage them to be like, hey, here's what I'd love for you to do. You're going to start getting properties. Go to open houses, take a look at things, right? Go and collect data so you can validate the decisions you're making. Tour the neighborhoods, drive around and look at the schools at different times during the day. Go and do some recon, so you become comfortable with those choices. And of course, let me know if there's anything that you want to change or modify or neighborhoods that you need to switch up. It's really all about setting the tone, like go and do stuff, right? Don't sit back and wait, but go and do stuff. And then in a week from now or 4 days from now, let's revisit because I'll have a plan for that first round of properties that I want to go and visit with you. And that's sort of the marching orders we give at that last little piece. Sorry about the little bumps in there. I don't know if I missed any questions or missed any stuff. Jen, anything in there that
no,
you want to add to? Apologize for
yeah,
the
I really do. On the self-paced, when I bought my first home, now I'm going to date myself, but um, my mom, who works in our
long.
brokerage, sent me at that time, we were using MLS search, and she sent
Yep,
me the addresses for all the homes in the area I was looking for. And they were like,
yep,
this is a totally different time because we're talking like
yeah,
the late 90s, early 2000s. um, all the homes that were available in my price range and what I was looking at. And she asked me just to drive by the homes
yep,
before she showed them to me so I could see what the neighborhood looked like, what the house
yep,
condition looked like, just from the outside, even. And
yeah.
that helped me eliminate a ton of properties. Now, in today's market, that may or may not be the case, but I thought that was a really great idea because it also helped me decide what was important for me to look at too.
Yeah, and I think that's notoriously what happens, and we'll talk about this in the office meeting. You're like, I always say to clients like, hey, if we pull up to a property and your gut just instantly shifts, don't do me any favors to walk around the house and pretend like you like it. We're out of here. Like you don't owe me a tour just because we're here. If you pull up to the curb and you're like, oh no, no, just say it. Just say it and it's off our list and we're on to the next property. And a great way to eliminate that is to tour the neighborhoods and even using Google Street View and just doing a recon, right? We know on the selling side, we often take very flattering photos that generally represent the property. And on the realistic side, sometimes those things aren't true. So,
Yeah.
Jen, you want to set us up for the office meeting?
Yeah. So basically, what I just gave you an example of is what we're going to talk about in the office meeting. We're just going to talk about, we have a lot of experience in all of our
Mhm.
offices. And so I would encourage those people to share. And I would really encourage our newer agents to come and listen also to those discussions, because we're going to talk about personally what is the practice that you do when you are preparing a buyer to show homes. What has really worked for you? And then we have some kind of questions to prompt the discussion. But then also, we end up with buyers that have analysis paralysis or they're on the fence. And what tactics or strategies do you use to move their decision along or to help them with their decision?
Yep.
So that's what we're going to talk about. We have lots of resources to share as well. So that's what we're going to be doing on Tuesday.
Thank you. And before my internet connection drops out yet again, thank you, Jen, for again always being here producing this content. I feel like I know the agents know that this is valuable stuff. As we go through the process, I know we add a lot to your plate in conversations, and our goal is just to sort of elevate all of us a little bit through this process. So let us know what you'd like to see, what you'd like to talk about, maybe what you'd like a deeper dive on. We are always there to help you guys, as I always say, give you guys higher quality problems in your process. So, Jen, thank you as always.
Yep.
Thanks everybody for joining us. See you soon.
Thank you. Have a good one.